Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kyle Tooke. I'm the Director of Client Services for Intelligent Buildings and co-host of IB Thinking About. Joined today with Andy Schonberger, our VP of Client Services, and Bayron Lopez, who is the Head of Operational Technologies for Kilroy Realty. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Hey, Kyle. Hi, Byron.
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Good.
Not too shabby. So today's agenda, we're going to be chatting about innovation roadmaps. Now, Bayron, you've been with Kilroy for quite some time and are really the primary person, I think, for Kilroy that is driving innovation, planning out the roadmaps, but there's a lot of challenges that come with that. Um, you know, we make jokes about hair and pulling hair out and implementing. And I've found on the consulting side and being on the other end of the table, working with real estate organizations, a lot of times it can be extremely frustrating getting everyone speaking the same language, getting the right people in the room, and really driving towards an end goal, a cohesive vision that everyone is on the same page. Now it looks like you're doing a great job because you still have all of your hair. I unfortunately am follically challenged.
And thank you for saying that, but it's really a group effort, right? At Kilroy, we like to say that we are where innovation works, and we really mean that across all of our departments and our teams. I'm lucky enough that I'm able to talk about the projects that the team does, but it's really a collaboration of, engineering, sustainability, asset management, risk management, legal, operations. So we all actually take on this challenge together to make sure that we're providing the best services, the best buildings, the best operations we can for our tenants. I'm just lucky enough that the teams allowed me to talk on their behalf and be here for them, right? Without them, we wouldn't be in the spaces that we are now. We have great challenges at the top that challenge us, our leaders challenge us to be more innovative and go forward. So that's where we are able to move and be able to contribute to the organization. But yeah, it's a group effort.
Yeah, for sure. I find that, some organizations struggle with that, but you usually end up having, and I've found you usually end up having someone who's the key driver. But you'd mentioned some of the different hats that you always try to get in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times there's different priorities, there's different pains, there's different things. How do you manage just making sure everyone's voice is accounted for, everyone's voice is heard, and making sure that you guys are aligning to a common vision on what a Kilroy Realty experience and Kilroy Realty asset looks like?
We get direction from our operations teams, right? One of the big things that we did early on was understanding the challenges across all the departments. We didn't want to see that we were dictating policy for everyone, right? Because everything has to balance out. So we can't, as IT or OT, say, this is how it's going to be. We don't care about your policy. We have to say, what is the challenges that you guys are trying to focus on? Where can we help you improve? I don't want to take over anybody's jobs, right? I don't want to be the HVAC guy. I don't want to be the security guy. I want to be the guy that helps those teams figure out the challenges that they're having. So early on, we understood that we had to have a committee. We had to have discussions amongst each other and figure out what the use cases were. And Andy was, one of those pivotal pieces at the beginning where we were trying to figure out what were the use cases, where were our challenges, and how can we bring that together with a technology background, right? Serving as that resource for the different departments, but ensuring that they were even talking to each other, right? If engineering wanted to do a project that would benefit sustainability and security, why don't we have all those three groups talk together, right? Not just be a silo. It's always been siloed in the systems. We needed to have cross functionality available to be able to be successful, right? If you're just doing your thing, you're not seeing what everybody else is doing, you're not going to be able to make changes happen. But if you're saying, look, we have this project that's going to affect all three departments, four departments, and then we can also share budgets, right? So it's not a big hit for one person, it's a hit across the board. It makes you more efficient as well, right? So now instead of spending, let's say, $50,000 on one thing, you can cut that by a third or by a fourth, which allows you to do other projects down the road as well. So you're focused on multiple things. So that was the biggest piece for us to understand that our executive team wanted this to happen, and then different levels of the departments to say, yeah, let's work together, let's come together and figure out how to go forward.
I remember sitting in the boardroom with you guys after that first assessment. This is like 6 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw, we'll leave the details out, but we saw some things that were pretty scary and pretty eye-opening. And I can distinctly remember having a conversation with a couple of vendors who basically said, this is not my problem, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And going through the, oh boy, the so what's out of that. And how was the line of business going to react to that? How was your peers in the enterprise architecture side of things and the risk management and, folks dealing with the insurance premiums, not to mention just keeping the lights on in the building. Like, I saw you guys actively collaborate together to try and fix this problem. And I think we all got smacked in the face by some of the responses from the vendors after our first, diligence assessments, the cyber assessments, and then getting into creating that policy and governance. So you guys have come a long way since those first meetings, but that was a lot of fun. There was some cats to herd for sure. And the whole industry's come quite a ways since then, but proof in the pudding that you guys were pretty keen and given a really long leash from your leadership too, to really dive into some of these problems to make everybody aware of it, start running with it.
Well, that's one of the big things, right? There's a lot of trust, right? A lot of the teams at Kilroy have been here for a while, right? Our leadership team has been in place for a very long time, and they've been really successful, right? If you look at Kilroy's growth over the years, over the decades, the leadership team has had a strategic view of where they want to take the company as a whole. And getting that direction for operations as well, and being able to say, we understand that that's your vendor, but your vendor has to meet these requirements. We had a vendor say, well, why do you care? You're not a big engineering company. You're not, Boeing, Northrop, or one of those guys. We're like, well, we could be, right? You don't know who's in our buildings. You don't know who's actually leasing our spaces, right? They are big organizations as well. So even though I don't have that type of a title like Northrop Grumman Engineering or whatever that is, we're still in development, and the technology coming out of commercial real estate is impressive, right? The amount of data, the amount of systems, we are, for all instances, we are a construction company as well, right? We build our own stuff with our GCs, and we have to figure out, what are we going to deploy into space? What is the most efficient way to move people, in an elevator? What's the best mechanical way to get somebody up to that floor without having too many issues? And all these other myriad of solutions that go into a building that require engineering, technology, cybersecurity policies in place. And if you're saying we don't consider you guys one of those, well, we'll talk to another vendor that can consider us that way.
Now, with the hat that you're wearing internally there, Bayron, you have all these different stakeholders that may or may not all speak the same language, but do you find yourself kind of having to wear the hat of teacher on all of these new technologies and, internally? So are you having to be that individual that's educating your head of property management, your head of leasing, your head of engineering on all the different nuances of different techs, how they impact each other? Are you the person wearing that hat for Kilroy?
We do that together. So you guys have probably heard of Conran, who's my VP of enterprise applications. So we try to take that approach together, right? And sometimes it will be the other way around, because like I said, I am not a HVAC specialist, right? My head of engineering will tell us this is how it's supposed to operate. And then we'll go back and say, okay, how does the technology side supposed to operate? Do they merge together, right? If we're parsing data or passing data to these networks, where is it connecting, right? What is the backend going to look like? So we work together for them to teach me what is the expectation of the physical equipment in a space. And then I go back and say, okay, from a digital standpoint, from a networking standpoint, this is what we're expecting. And let's make sure that that is talking together. So we'll teach each other. One of the great things we'll do is we'll go to conferences and events and meet with vendors in the space and say, okay, from a technology standpoint, this is what we're looking to do. Your component does only these pieces. Where can we take advantage of, your roadmap going forward, and then leverage both sides, right? Because if we say it's great on the technology side, but it doesn't work in the space, then that's something that's going to go out, right? I can't dictate the technology just because it's great from my side, right? They might have an awesome cybersecurity policy, but if it doesn't work in the field, then it's not going to work at all. So that's where we take, advantage of each other's skill sets to make sure that we're growing together. And yeah, sometimes we have to talk about what is the cyber policy? What is the structure of networking cables, right? Or where are we supposed to deploy, fiber versus copper? Because they might not be aware that there's a limitation, but then they will teach us the versions of pieces that we don't know either. So it's learning from each other and working as a team, right? I'm lucky enough that I work with our head of physical security closely. And he has taught me some great policies and implementations of security and physical security. And, why are we doing, bushes with thorns? And, how do we put a camera on specific areas, physical defense tied to technology. So that's kind of how we grow together to understand the pieces of the building.
That sounds like a cybersecurity policy, bushes with thorns. That sounds more fun than defense in depth or anything else NIST based, doesn't it?
I mean, it's one of those things that you never really realize why certain things or certain plants are used around buildings, right? I never thought about that until we started doing walkthroughs for our security teams, and they're saying, yeah, let's put more thorny bushes there, or pieces of foliage that might, deter somebody from trying to jump that fence, right? A camera is great, but if somebody's trying to go and they get cut up or poked or something, then you're probably not going to want to go in there. If you see a camera, okay, maybe I'll cover my face, right? But if you see something that might prick you or cut you, then you're probably not going to want to go that way. So
technology is not always the answer. Yes,
exactly.
Well, and you had mentioned earlier that you go to the conferences, you and Con, and you talk to all these different vendors. And I've worn the hat of being a technology vendor for a few different companies, and one of the things that can be extremely challenging is how do you validate that a technology is not just going to work for one of Kilroy's properties, but scale it across a portfolio. And it's kind of a taboo or ugly word in the industry is we're going to pilot this thing, right? So there are technologies that are easy to pilot, and there are a lot of technologies that are very complex and very difficult to pilot because it can be very invasive. It has to touch a lot of other systems. There's integrations and APIs you have to be considerate of, right? So how does Kilroy look at, okay, we think that this is going to be a product or a technology that is going to really enhance the Kilroy experience in our properties. We got to validate it and test it first. How does Kilroy approach that?
So we take a very, very, very long approach. As Andy will tell you, probably with our initial IB, engagement, we are not looking for a one-time solution, right? We're looking for a portfolio-wide, long-term engagement, right? We don't just look at the technology itself. We look at the profile of the company, right? What is the background of the company? How long have they been in play, right? What is their long-term strategy? Are they looking just to get in companies on board so they can then dump that to somebody else and sell it off, right? We look at the entire stack of the organization to make sure that one, it's going to be around for the long term, and two, the technology is going to be there, right? After all, we are looking for the technology, but if a company comes in, sells you a great piece of networking equipment or solution or software, and then a year later they're gone, then you just spent all this time, doing the work without the reward, right? So we take long-term approaches to our pilots, right? Sometimes our pilots are 6 months plus, just so that we are aware. And we tell the vendor, upfront, look, we take our time because once we select a vendor and organization, we are partners with that organization, right? We are not going to say you're only going to get one building. You're going to get the majority of our buildings if that's beneficial for the portfolio, right? Because standardization across the board is great, right? We are distributed around amongst 5 different regions, right? And sometimes our teams will travel, right? We'll have people who maybe have started up in San Francisco who have moved in LA. We have a gentleman who started in our LA office who's now running the Austin office, right? So our teams travel across as well. Engineers trying to travel amongst properties as well. So you want to make sure that you have a portfolio-wide solution. So we take a strategic view there, right? Not something that's just going to be worth it for today, but the long run for the organization, it's going to bring value to us. So we take our time, our due diligence, our teams take a look at the company from all different aspects. There's been times where we are looking at organizations and something happens within that organization, and maybe they start falling apart, or financially they're not there, or they start, releasing employees, and that gives us a red flag. So then we take a step back and say, okay, what is the real long-term goals for them? So.
Well, and you got to see red flags going off left and right now with everything that's going on. We've had 2 major banks close and within 72 hours, right? Prop tech and innovation, cybersecurity tech, biotech, all have taken it on the chin with a lot of these funds that are tethered to these banks. It's got to be throwing up red flags left and right. So how does Kilroy now look at this and how it applies to the innovation roadmap that you have as far as risk mitigation?
Well, I mean, it goes back to our long-term strategy, right? It still goes back to that strength of the organization, how are they looking to implement solutions? We like to say that we are on the cutting edge, but we're not the cutting edge, right? We're not going to go out there and be the earliest adopter. We will be an early adopter, right? We will look at technologies and say, if something is merits our involvement and our deployment, then we will go out it and get it. But if it's somebody who says, yeah, we can get you a solution, we don't actually have a working product yet, it's going to be there in 6 months, then we'll be, okay, well, come back to me in 6 months, come back to me in a year. Come back to me when you actually have proof of this device actually doing work in the field, and also talking to other colleagues, right? One of the biggest things, and you guys are members of the REC as well, is being able to share amongst colleagues and organizations. What have you seen from this vendor? Are they promising you this? They told me they were going to get this to me. They told me you're using it. Oh, you're not, right? So being able to share and be more transparent in the industry has been a big piece of what's happening now, right? Being able to share amongst your colleagues and call up somebody and say, hey, so and so told me that you are a user of this technology, that you have it deployed across your entire portfolio. And then just to find out and say, yes, it's in the portfolio, but it's not being used for what you're going to use it for. It's being used for a very small subset. The other thing is that Kilroy likes to stretch the technology. We like to push it to the limits. We like to make sure that if we're using a technology, that we're using all the aspects of it. So we will be something that will be somebody who will be pushing the boundaries, right? You might tell us that you can do A, B, and C, and then we'll say, well, what about D, E, and F? And then where else can we grow the solution, and how can we help you as an organization expand, right? So our long-term goal is to be partners, not just a client, to be able to have a partnership with that vendor that will grow both for them and for us so that we can be successful. Because if a vendor is growing, then we are happy, right? If the vendor is not going out of business, then we are ensuring that technology is still going to be in place, and we're able to work with them going forward.
So your title really should be prop tech whisperer then, right? Not director of operational technology.
It's sometimes it's a challenge, yeah, because sometimes I've seen a bunch of solutions where somebody will be really, really excited about it, and they'll be like, let's go all in, and then I'll reel us back in and say, well, let's figure out the steps. Let's go back to our basics. Let's go back to our strategy. Technology is very, very exciting. Even myself, when I try to buy something at home and try to innovate, and my wife will be like, well, do you need it? Do you need that, new 16 channel controller for the irrigation system that we only have two plumb pipes on? Like, yeah, okay, yeah. Let me go back and figure out where it also makes financial sense, right? Because like you said, the market is getting interesting. The market is getting tight. Funds and acquisitions and purchases of new technology are going to be more strategic. So we have to make sure that a vendor who we're going to be doing business with has a long-term roadmap and not just wants to dump the application of the solution and exit that organization fast.
So question for you, Bayron. I wanted to pick up on what you mentioned about standardizing, because a lot of our customers that are, we'll say, like you guys, like Kilroy, there is this push and pull between this panacea of standardizing some things and being able to push things out and scale, but then also having local context on technology and having the local asset manager or the local team be able to fit budgets and amenities into their local decision-making criteria, not have the big central office folks over their shoulder telling them what to do on some of these things. How do you guys balance that? Because it's a perpetual push-pull from our clients on best practices centrally versus what should be done per building.
So we scare them sometimes to tell them, well, if you do it on your own, we're not going to support you, right? If it's off of our network, if it's not on, we are probably not going to be able to help you. So when something happens, you will be on your own. And for the most part, that, it tends not to happen, right? For the most part, the teams are actually very, very well aware. And the biggest thing is that we had the support of our C-level executives, right? The guys at the top, guys and ladies at the top, who are running the strategy for the organization and saying, yes, this is what we want to see across the board, right? So our head of asset management will give us a direction that he wants us to move forward with. We will be able to go back and say, this is the infrastructure that is needed, right? Regardless of what applications we're going to use, there should be a standardized, formalized infrastructure that we will always follow, right? We will help with the budget. We will help with the planning. We will maintain it. We will support it. But those pieces of infrastructure, networking switches, firewalls, connectivity, that has to be the standard. This is the minimum standard that is needed. If a building is much bigger, then it has to be at a different level. But the minimum standard for a building, even if it just has one system, should be this 24 or 48 port switch. Even if you're telling me that we're only going to have one connection to that switch, it should be a 24 port switch, because down the road, you're going to want to innovate something. You're going to want to add a technology. You're going to want to add smart lighting or something else. And if you only put an 8-port switch, quickly you're going to find out that you're, buying further equipment. You're trying to daisy chain things together. Start with the standard, plan forward, and be able to go from there. And then as they bring us new technologies, as they say, look, this is the solution that we want to utilize for after hours HVAC or water detection program or tenant amenity spaces, then we will integrate that into the infrastructure that's already there. And we're able to be more flexible, because then we can say, yes, the infrastructure can take it, or sorry, that solution won't work because they need unlimited internet access, outbound ports and everything, and they just want to go to the internet. So that doesn't even have a proper cybersecurity policy. So we've established foundations. We have something we call the Kilroy Matrix, right? That was built with our head of security, our vendor of security, who is kind of our trusted VAR for everything in security and access control, technology, and asset management, to say, what are the requirements? What is the technology that fits our needs? Where can we source it? Right? Because you also want to make sure that you have sources for it, right? With the supply chain the way it is right now, ordering access control panels or readers or all these different pieces take forever. So making sure that you know how long it's going to be for you to order those pieces and how long it's going to take to arrive has allowed us to keep a structure in place. So we've taken, somebody mentioned, there's a book out there that actually mentions it at being an IT monarchy when it comes to hardware and infrastructure, right? But being able to work with the teams to make sure that they are getting their goals met while still keeping that standard in place for everything else.
So I think we've established that everybody needs to clone Bayron, and then scaling at innovation becomes a lot easier.
Well, let's take a step back here. So let's say we're an organization that doesn't have Bayron, right? And there's an edict that comes down. We've got to innovate. We've got to be a forward-thinking organization. Someone coming into a role like yours, Bayron, who, for whatever wherever their organization, they don't even know how to get started. Coming into your role, what was step one for you on getting all of this moving in the right direction?
Buying lunches and drinks for a bunch of people. I'm serious. It's actually a very easy way to start talking to people about their needs and challenges, and people want to teach you what they're doing, right? And making sure that they understand you're not here to take their job. You're here to help them make their job more efficient, find different ways of solving solutions, and make it easier to be able to produce the building, right? We're in the business of leasing space, keeping our tenants happy, developing new properties, right? Whether that is a janitorial person who makes sure that the building is clean and spiffy the whole day, or that is our, head of sustainability or the top of the company, making sure that they're going out to lease and making sure that they're the face of the organization. We're in the business of keeping the properties at the tip top of technology, the best shape, and making sure that people want to continue leasing. But in order for me to be successful, I need to understand what those people are doing, what do they need, and what are their challenges. And the easiest way to do that is over lunch. You take somebody out, your head of engineering, and say, what are your pain points? What do you need help with? Where can I help you? And then you start talking to the teams, right? You start talking about what are their what do they think we should go with technology, right? Some of the guys will tell you, we don't want any technology at all. I'm faster than a computer at calculating, different pieces. So don't bring me anything in there. We'll be, okay, cool. But what if you don't have to be faster than a computer or have to do all that math by hand? What if we can give you all that data and you can then pick and choose and say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, right? What if we can give you, water detection systems that used to be on all phone lines, right? That you were paying different internet phone lines on, consolidate that into the building's internet infrastructure and say that is now going to reduce your costs. So as an asset manager, if I'm telling you that I'm taking that, $1,000, $2,000 bill on internet every month and making it $500, that now frees up your budget for something else. So the biggest thing was understanding the teams, what are their challenges. The technology itself is technology, right? It's IT, it's infrastructure, it's fundamentals of technology and spaces and deployment. That's not going to change. The way that we manage it, we handle it, and we deploy it, that's the piece that you need to understand and how it's going to be focused for your organization. During the pandemic, we had a bunch of vendors try to sell us cameras, temperature checking cameras, all these solutions, robots, UV lighting. It was something that was cool, but it wasn't really needed towards the progress of the building, right? Our janitorial staff, can clean spaces, right, based on occupancy, you don't need to send a robot to do that every single minute or every 5 minutes or whatever it was. And then you're still hiring and keeping those people employed, right? Especially during the pandemic when a lot of those services were being axed, we were able to retain staff, right, and be able to work through them and make sure that they were able to take care of the building. But understanding their challenges was the biggest piece that you need to know. It's the technology fundamentals you're going to use that are, from basic IT principles, but placing them into the building to understand the challenges that they have.
Yeah, I remember seeing, during that time frame, I was, seeing all these different technologies and blacklight technology and HEPA filter, this, that, and the other for air changeovers. And I just kept on telling people, look, if you're going to have your staff that's going to be doing cleaning and they're going to be doing things in their whatever their schedule is, but if you have the data and understand utilization, you can change that paradigm into more of a demand based or a usage based, cadence augmentation, keep people employed just like you're talking about, but be more efficient and always and still maintain a safe, clean working environment.
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with you on that. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to bring up in this conversation, Bayron, is, you guys are positioned in the market as at least I consider a leader in life sciences, biotech for a lot of the facilities that you have in the market. Now, taking into account the type of tenants that you're serving for those assets, what kind of impact does that have on your decisions on technology and innovation roadmap for those types of assets versus maybe some of your more traditional office assets?
It's very strategic, right? When you develop, maintain, and construct a building, right, the basics of that operations, right? You always want fast, reliable elevators. You want access that is available for all your tenants. You want to make sure that people are able to come into the building without having too much of a hassle, right? If you have to carry too many cards and all these pieces, or if you can do everything from your mobile device, that makes it easier for you to come to the space. With biotech, there's different requirements, and the pieces for them are mostly focused around labs, methane detection, HVAC systems, the availability of the space being up at all times. Power to the spaces, right? They'd use massive amounts of power for the equipment. So developing those buildings is a little bit more focused on the infrastructure reliability and making sure that the site is available 100% of the time. Right. As opposed to a commercial space where you might have people who come in in a hybrid workforce, right? You might go to your office 2 or 3 times a week if you have, a regular corporate job. But if you're working in a lab, in a bioscience space, you have to be there. You can't do those types of things at home, right? So that's kind of where we focus on making sure that the asset is reliable, safe space, and then we're working with the tenant to figure out what their needs are, right? Whether that is a comfort solution for the space that they require because they use it across the board at other locations. Is it reliable services being brought in by the ISP? Power to the building, making sure that if something happens that you are on e-power, have emergency solutions available. So that's kind of where the focus for biotech is. A lot of those companies have their own kind of internal technology policies, their own internal ways of operating, right? So we don't necessarily take over the space or the tenant space. We want to make sure that the core and shell, the operations outside of it, is something that they want to come into work. Because if you're forced to come in, you should probably come into somewhere where it's beautiful, a great building, something that you have amenities, food accessible to you. So that's kind of where we focus, not just in biotech, but overall, and making sure that is a welcoming space, right? That if you look at Oyster Point, our South San Francisco project, it's an amazing project, right? 12 buildings. We're putting in green spaces. We're putting in Wi-Fi amenities for the services. There is a shuttle. There's all these different things so that you want to come to work. And once you're there, we're making sure that the building's also reliable for you to be able to do whatever you're needing. So those are the pieces that we're focused on, not just biotech, but across the portfolio to make sure that you are welcome into the space. If you've been down to our Kettner property in San Diego, has a beautiful view of the bay. You sit up there and you can see Coronado, you see the airport, you see downtown San Diego, right? You have a lot of amenities around the space. It's very sustainable. The way that they was designed with, the wood that they use, the glass, all that stuff that was selected by our sustainability team to be a core of the building, right? You want to enjoy the sunny days in San Diego. You don't want to sit inside of a bunker of concrete, not having good views, right? So that's kind of the planning that goes across the environment. And that's where you can see it being from construction, being from sustainability, and then from technology coming in saying, we will provide these amenities to the space, right? If you go to every single door there, you can wave at the door and the door will automatically open for you. You can kick the button at the bottom of the door and the door will automatically open to you. Right. So those are types of pieces that we're making technology work for the building in conjunction with the design that, our team has also chosen.
Oh, very good. And well, we're at the kind of 30-minute point. I want to pivot us over and reach out to our audience and see if there are any questions that our audience have. So for those of you that are tuned in, if you have any questions you want to pose to either myself or Andy or Bayron, now would be the time. We take just a couple of minutes.
First one,
you're talking a little bit about like the energy loads and things like that a minute ago, and kind of demand on that. So, that's a pretty common one we have right now that comes up pretty regularly. Andy, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, you think energy bills are expensive. Have you seen chimneys? They're through the roof.
Hi-oh!
I have to prepare at least one. We said we were going to do it, so I'm just going to keep doing it, even if it's making me cringe too.
There's our status quo dad joke for the episode. Let's see what we have as questions coming in. There's a good one. So innovations that we're seeing now prioritize versus what we saw pre-pandemic. I'll take a first stab at that. Pre-pandemic, I think, was kind of the era where we saw the uptick of the shiny employee experience app, where everyone was just diving straight into this. I have to have an app. And I think there was a surge in that, and everything was very focused on experience. And then through the pandemic, I think was a very clear-cut time of exposing how poor everyone's data strategy was. And the need for data, because everyone was trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with these spaces when people are now working at home? How much space do we need? And we've seen a continuation of that. And then right now, I think there's a continuation of that. And then also, he's also had this surgence of sustainability. And I think that's really just driven by legislation. And I think we're going to continue to see that as we're really right now, I think, looking at Europe to kind of mature a lot of that regulatory and standards and policy. And as you can see, some of the larger metros in the US are kind of following suit, but they're letting Europe kind of drive that. But I'll get off my soapbox. Bayron, what are your thoughts around that? Because, I mean, you're the one who's responsible for Kilroy's roadmap. I would imagine you've had some pivots over the last 5 to 6 years. So pre-pandemic versus now, what do you see the differences? What's being prioritized?
I think you're on track with the tenant amenity piece, right? I remember talking to one of my colleagues who had attended a conference, and everything was tenant amenity, tenant amenity. If you're not going tenant amenity, your application, tenant amenity application, you're going to be falling behind. After the world reopened and we were allowed to travel, he went to the same conference again, and nobody was talking about tenant amenity applications. It was one of those things where they realized that it was either not as far along as we thought it was going to be. The integrations were lacking. People were actually deploying it, but it was really a website version of a mobile version of your website, right? We were expecting to be able to do geolocations. We were expecting to be able to do opening of access control doors. We were able to visitor management through that. And then it came back and said, well, the application's not ready. The integration's not ready. The vendor's having issues. Here's the pretty website that we developed for you on the mobile side, but those other functions that you actually want to happen are still, 6 months to a year away. And that's kind of where the struggle has happened. There are solutions that are fragmented, right? So TKE, Otis, they will sell you their elevator application, right? But they won't necessarily integrate with that tenant amenity application. Or they will say, no, we want you to pay us the money. HID has a great solution, right? That will get you into the building. Has a bunch of functions, right? Twist and go, tap and go. But then when you try to integrate that into your tenant application, those functions go away because they only do one thing, right? So the integrations are not fully developed there. Do I think there's a great roadmap for tenant amenity applications? Yeah. I mean, if I'm able to do everything from the phone, because that's the device that I probably won't ever forget. I might forget my wallet, I might forget my glasses, but I will not forget my phone, right? That thing's glued onto me everywhere I go. So that's a good application that we should be continuing, but need to make sure that's strategic. During COVID, we saw a lot of solutions for health and wellness, right? Or detecting people who are sick or who are, might not be doing correctly or not be feeling well. That has now pivot, right? We're using our analytics for operations as the buildings are less occupied, right? We need to make sure that those analytics are eyes and ears in the building. So if we know that a space isn't being used and a camera suddenly detects activity, that should create a script or an alert to our security team to say, look, this space is not under usage. The tenant's not there. Who's in the space? Oh, it's a cleaning lady. Okay, cool. Or, oh, it's a security guard who found out there's a couch up there and he's sleeping there now. Or there is a person who walked off the streets because there was a door open who is now encamped in this space. We should probably get them out of that, right? That's where we are looking for technology to be used. And that was just the strategic goal of our solution, right? Not put in thermometer checking or temperature checking cameras, but put cameras with smart analytics to give you more solutions to be more efficient going forward. That was our long-term goal, right? Technology that's for today that also is going to meet the expectations of 4, 5, 6 years from now, that will be growing with us and that is also sustainable.
I see a question here that is a little spicy.
Okay.
So you get a lot of technologies paraded in front of you, Bayron. Is there a technology category or a specific technology that you've seen that you just wholeheartedly feel, and they're using some choice words, I'm not going to use them, but it's just absolute just snake oil?
That's tough, right? Because there's a lot of industries where there is this kind of thanking of everybody, or everybody's thanking each other. Yeah, you're the best in the space. You're the best in the space. That's like what I think happens the most, right? I think that organizations, not necessarily technologies, are not worth it, because every technology, if you're able to utilize it for the purpose of your needs, is going to be worth it, right? At the end of the day, if it gives you the functions that you want, resolves the problem that you're having, whether that works for you or somebody else, if it works for you, then it's going to be successful. The problem that happens is when organizations start pumping themselves up and saying, yeah, you're the best at this because you told me I was the best, so now you're the best, right? So you're just making this agreement between organizations saying, without too much proof or without too much development, right? There was that a bunch of money that came into the space, right? And that came in from different organizations that maybe were not within the building technology solutions teams, who saw an opportunity, who saw COVID and saw all these dollars that were available, and basically said, well, if I tell him he's the best, in 6 months he'll tell me I'm the best, and then we'll tell this guy we're the best, right? Even though we might not have sold anything, maybe we don't have support, maybe the application's still in development, but we can tell each other that we're the best at that, right? I think what needs to happen is a real approach from our organizations who are actually using the technologies, who are identifying the solutions out into the space and being able to say, yeah, these guys are in the space, they're best in class. We recommend it for this function. We're not saying they're the best at everything they do, but they meet our expectations. So I don't know, that's a political correct way of saying, I don't want to.
That was very professional. Yeah,
yes.
Kyle was looking for a spicy take.
I saw a lot of bobbing and weaving there, Bayron.
Yeah.
There's great spaces and there's great people in this industry, right? And one day we might be on the other side, right? And we want to make sure that we're all cordial. You don't want to burn any bridges, right? And we also want to make sure that if there's somebody who's out there who feels that they have a great solution, a great technology, and they want to innovate and they want to work with us, then we're open to doing that. It just has to be able to meet the expectations of the property, right? Budgets are getting tighter, right? Budgets are getting smaller. If we go into somebody called it a CRE recession or CREmageddon, CRE Armageddon, right?
Hashtag Creamageddon.
Yeah, if that happens, it's going to be even harder. So we want to make sure that technology companies are growing and cutting out the, yeah, you're the best, I'm the best, we're the best. No, let's make sure that the industry tells you you're the best because you have high marks, you have high usage, you have great adoption, and you're able to move forward that way.
I think we got time for one more question. Now you've got folks within the organization that you have to answer to, right? When decisions are made, got to be held accountable. So you got to be able to have something to justify or validate or, measurements on whether or not one of your endeavors was successful or not. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at these technology deployments, whether it's building level or portfolio level, what are the things that you are using as KPIs to deliver to the internal stakeholders that says this was a success or no, this was just an absolute shit show?
So, I mean, being a organization that's making money, that wants to make money, right? Making sure that we can reduce our costs was a big one, right? So early on, we had the concept of converging the building network, right? Bringing all the silos into one network, making sure that we reduce the amount of internet connections that we had out there. So that was a really good success, right? We were able to reduce the bills from our internet service providers in the building and say, you no longer have to pay these 5 bills, just pay this one bill that covers the entire stack. We have a backup circuit just in case you need it. But that was a reduction in cost that was helpful for a bunch of our properties, right? Now they know also that what happens many times with providers is also that you will send them a check for $20,000 for 4 different circuits, and they will apply all that $20,000 to one, and now tell you you're delinquent on the other 3 and cancel that circuit out, right? So you have to spend 4 hours on the phone with AT&T saying, no, that 20 grand should be distributed amongst these 4. And eventually they might get your circuit back up. And if you had static IP addresses, those are no longer there because they've released it to somebody who needed them. All right, so you're now having to go back and re-IPing all your equipment, reissuing connectivity. So what we did is we reduced that, and now we're able to say you pay one bill. If for some reason that bill doesn't get paid or gets delayed, you know what bill it should be and what should be applied to it. So that gave us a big reduction in cost. The other thing was during the pandemic is truck rolls, right? Everybody's going to charge you a truck roll fee, right? It's going to be 2 hours of driving, whatever that's going to be, right? If you're able to provide a remote access solution so that that technician doesn't have to be on site, they can be at home in their pajamas, just typing away, that helps us reduce cost. Also standardization, right? If we know what a camera should cost us, right? If we go to vendor A, B, C, or D, and the IT department has told you this is what the camera should cost, and you see double or triple, okay, that vendor is probably trying to get money out of you that we should probably not work with, right? So there's been reductions in costs, being more sustainable as well, right? Reducing the amount of equipment that you had within the building, right? Going mobile, right? Reducing the amount of physical key cards that you're wasting, right? So there's been a bunch of different things that we've been able to say that we've been successful with. There are some issues where, maybe it was an over estimation of hardware, right? Like that building that only has one internet connection, or only has one device. Maybe we said, okay, you had a 5x5, a 5 megabyte circuit that you were using, which is extremely slow. You have to go to 50 megs synchronous, right? It is going to cost you more money, but for the long term of the building and your endeavors, it's going to be there. So eventually it will pay off, right? Maybe we increase that budget there, but it is bringing you to a standard of operations, a cybersecurity policy that we have in place, and making sure that that applies across the portfolio.
Yeah, that was a great. I appreciate that because you laid out, a few different examples of types of technology you've implemented that was very successful and some that, kind of mixed. So definitely appreciate that. Before we roll out, Andy, do you have any final thoughts before we let Bayron have some of his time back for the day?
Don't open the door to more dad jokes. I'm good. Thanks for your time, Bayron. Great responses here and in depth too. I think we answered most of our audience's questions kind of in real time. So thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Yeah. And for those of you that are tuning in, Andy, can you make sure that I'm actually sharing my screen for this episode?
You can teach an old dog new tricks. You got it figured out.
I got it this time. Score. So if you want to get in contact with Andy or myself, you have here the QR codes to schedule a meeting or to follow us on LinkedIn. We've got Kilroy's contact information. If you want to link up with Bayron Lopez, there's his LinkedIn profile. Also want to encourage everyone who's tuned in today that next month we're going to have Paige Pritchard. She's the head of strategic partnerships for Modern Ventures out of Chicago. They're a venture capital firm. We're going to be talking about the volatility of the prop tech market. There's a lot going on right now. You know, that we've had 2 major banks that have closed that are funding a lot of these early stage startups and innovators in our industry. We're going to dive deep into all of those different elements. She'll be speaking to it from a VC perspective and how they look at prop tech vendors. I'll speak to it from someone who's been in more in the prop tech hat for many, many years. We encourage you to join us April 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Bayron, always awesome to talk to you. Looking forward to see you face to face here in the coming months as we have some of these industry events come up. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.